Welcome to my channel. Subscribe and enjoy my new stories every day. It was never supposed to be like this. Sarah and I, we were meant to be the strong couple, the one friends looked to for proof that marriage could last. When we married 14 years ago, I was sure we'd go the distance. I didn't expect to be pacing the living room, watching the clock tick past midnight, waiting for her to come home with that line of hers that had started to sound so rehearsed. "Don't wait up for me," she'd said that Friday night, her voice smooth, her gaze a bit too cool. Maybe I should have questioned her right there and then. Maybe I should have asked why she'd be gone all night. But part of me didn't want to start something I couldn't stop. So I nodded, pretended I was unbothered, and watched as she strolled out without so much as a backward glance. My mind told me there was nothing unusual here, but that gut feeling, the one I'd ignored for months, gnawed at me. Something was wrong, I could feel it. I gave her a 10-minute head start before grabbing my keys, not really knowing where I was headed. I just had to see for myself. The streets were quiet, only a few cars, and a calm night under the stars, but I felt my pulse quickening, my grip tightening on the steering wheel as I tailed her from a safe distance. She didn't go far, just across town, to that upscale restaurant we'd gone to for our last anniversary. She parked, stepped out of the car with the grace and confidence of someone who knew they weren't being watched. Then he arrived. I felt a stab of jealousy in something darker, something raw, as I watched her smile and lean in for a kiss with a man I didn't recognize. He drove a black Mercedes, dressed the way men do when they want to impress. Everything about it made me want to storm out of the car, demand answers, demand to know who he was. But somehow, I kept myself in check. She looked too comfortable with him, too at ease, and that's when I knew this wasn't the first time. I went home that night feeling like a fool. She'd lied so easily, without even a trace of guilt in her voice. It felt like I was in some bad movie, the kind where the main character doesn't realize he's being betrayed until it's far too late. But I wasn't about to let her keep playing me. I'd never been one for grand gestures of revenge or shouting matches, but I knew I needed a plan. Over the next few weeks, I became a detective in my own marriage. Every time she left with that same excuse, I didn't argue, didn't show my cards. I just let her leave, waiting until I heard her car pull out of the driveway before checking the bank accounts, looking at her credit card receipts. A few calls to the restaurant she visited confirmed what I already knew: she'd made a regular reservation under her maiden name. Sarah must have thought she was subtle, thought she'd covered her tracks. But she didn't know me well enough, not really. She didn't know I was already one step ahead. And every little detail I uncovered became a new weight lifting off my shoulders. With each revelation, the hurt lessened, replaced by a quiet resolve. I'd never needed much in life: a good wife, a happy home, the kind of love you think you'll never lose. She'd taken all of that and tossed it away without a second thought. I'd decided that the next time she left, I'd be ready. I wouldn't confront her right away, wouldn't let her suspect a thing. No, I wanted her to think she'd gotten away with it, that she'd fooled me completely. There's something powerful in the silence, in letting someone believe they've won. The more she lied, the more certain I was of what I'd do. When that Friday finally came around, I'd already packed her things, every piece of jewelry she loved, her expensive shoes, her bags, all of it neatly stored in the car. I left nothing behind that she might cling to, nothing to give her an excuse to come back. She'd chosen to leave me in all but name, and tonight, I'd make sure she felt that choice. As I sat on the couch waiting, I thought about all those nights I'd let her excuses slide, all the times I'd ignored the feeling that something wasn't right. I'd wanted to believe in her, in us. But as I looked around our home, the one we'd built together, I realized it had all been a lie. It was my last night in this story she'd spun, and as the clock ticked on, I felt a strange sense of peace. This was the beginning of her end, and I'd make sure she'd never see it coming. Saturday morning, the day I had planned for weeks, dawned bright and clear. I'd been up for hours, pacing, every nerve on edge. Sarah had stayed out all night, exactly as expected. That was fine, it made things simpler. I'd left her things by the front door, her suitcases lined up in neat rows like they were part of some twisted farewell parade. There was no going back now, no second guessing. This was the end. Around 8, I heard her car pull into the driveway. I didn't move from where I stood, just waited, letting the silence settle thick and tense. A moment later, the front door opened, and she walked in, clearly caught off guard by the sight of me waiting for her. She froze, her eyes flicking to the suitcases lined up by the door, then back to me. "What's this?" she asked, feigning innocence, but I could see the guilt flash across her face. She knew. Somewhere deep down, she knew the game was up. "Thought I'd help you out," I said evenly. "I packed all your things. You won't have to come back for anything." She looked like she might faint, but instead, she blinked, regaining her composure. She'd been rehearsing her lies long enough to have this act perfected. "You're overreacting, you know that." Her voice was measured, controlled. "This isn't what you think." "Then enlighten me, Sarah," I replied, keeping my tone steady, even though every part of me wanted to yell. "Because from where I'm standing, it seems pretty clear." She scoffed, rolling her eyes. "It's not like that, all right. I went out with friends." "Friends," I repeated, unable to stop the small, bitter laugh that escaped me. "Right. You must have a lot of friends who meet you at expensive restaurants and drive black Mercedes." Her face paled, and for a second, her mouth opened, but no words came. She hadn't expected me to know. Maybe she'd convinced herself I was just some gullible fool who'd believe anything she fed me. I could see her scrambling for something to say, something to make me back down. "You've got it all wrong," she finally said, crossing her arms. This was never about you, all right? I just needed some time to myself." "To yourself?" I said, unable to hide the disbelief in my voice. "Spending the night with another man isn't exactly what I'd call time to yourself, Sarah." Her eyes flashed with anger then, like somehow I'd crossed a line. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. Maybe if you'd been around more, if you weren't so wrapped up in your own little world, we wouldn't be having this conversation." There it was, the blame, the attempt to turn it back on me. I'd expected it, of course. People like Sarah didn't take responsibility, they deflected, twisted, made themselves the victim. But it wasn't going to work this time. I took a step closer, feeling an eerie calm settle over me. "You're right," I said. "Maybe I wasn't around enough. Maybe I trusted you a little too much. But that's not on me, Sarah. That's on you." She flinched, but her expression hardened. "Fine," she snapped, folding her arms tightly. "If that's how you feel, then maybe this is for the best." For a second, we just stood there, the silence heavy with everything left unsaid. I'd thought there'd be some sense of closure in this moment, but all I felt was an emptiness I couldn't shake. This was the woman I'd spent years with, the woman I'd loved, and now here she was, looking at me with nothing but contempt in her eyes. It was like I'd never really known her at all. "Is this what you wanted, then?" I asked, gesturing to the suitcases. "To leave it all behind? Was it worth it?" She hesitated, just for a moment, and for the briefest second, I thought I saw a flicker of regret. But then her jaw tightened, her gaze sharpening. "Maybe it was," she said coldly. "Maybe I needed something more." I nodded slowly, swallowing the bitter truth. "Well, you've got what you wanted. Go ahead. Leave. And don't expect me to be here when you realize what a mistake you've made." Her expression faltered, and for the first time, I saw the slightest crack in her composure. But then she lifted her chin, brushing past me with her head held high. She walked out the door without looking back, leaving me standing alone in the hollow silence of our home. As I watched her drive away, a wave of emotions washed over me: anger, betrayal, sadness. But beneath it all, I felt a strange sense of relief. This chapter of my life was over, and though the future felt uncertain, I knew I'd come out stronger on the other side. I took a deep breath, letting the silence settle around me, and for the first time in months, I felt the weight lift. I'd been given a second chance, a clean slate, and I wasn't about to waste it. The first night alone felt strange. I'd lived in this house with Sarah for over a decade, filled it with memories, made it a home. But with her gone, everything looked different. Her shoes weren't by the door. Her coat wasn't draped over the kitchen chair like it always was. Even the silence felt sharper. Somehow, knowing she wouldn't be coming back filled the place with a new kind of emptiness. I spent most of the evening pacing from room to room, opening and closing drawers, as if checking that she'd really taken all of her things. There were no remnants of her left behind, no souvenirs of a time when we'd been happy. I found myself pausing at her closet, remembering the dozens of outfits she'd once tried on and left behind, the endless, "What do you think of this?" questions that now felt like echoes from another life. Around midnight, when sleep seemed impossible, I made a drink, leaned back on the couch, and let myself go numb. The memories, the betrayal, it all felt raw, like a fresh wound, but there was a cold satisfaction in it, too. This was the clean break I needed. I'd been the one to make the decision, to draw the line. I hadn't begged or pleaded, hadn't let her see the hurt she'd caused. She was out of my life, and I wasn't going to let her back in. But the peace I'd expected didn't settle in easily. Every corner of the house reminded me of her, of us. The late-night laughs, the quiet mornings, even the silly arguments over who would do the dishes. I found myself wondering how long it would take to rid myself of those memories, if it was even possible. The thought kept me awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling a hollow ache I hadn't anticipated. The next day, I decided I couldn't just sit around and let the silence consume me. I grabbed a trash bag and went through every room, purging it of anything that reminded me of her. Old anniversary cards, the small figurines she'd collected on our trips, a half-empty bottle of perfume, I threw them all out. Every item went into the trash with a strange mix of satisfaction and sorrow, as if I were peeling away the layers of a life that had once been mine. By the time I'd finished, the house looked different, emptier but somehow mine again. I hadn't realized how much of it had been filled with her things, her touch. Now, stripped down, it felt like I was seeing it clearly for the first time in years. It was in the middle of this cleanup that I found the envelope. It was tucked in a drawer in her office, hidden beneath a stack of old bills. My name was scrawled on the front, in her handwriting. For a moment, I considered throwing it away unread, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened it, unfolding the single sheet of paper inside. "James," it began. "I know by now you've probably pieced things together. I know you're hurt, and I wish things could have been different. But I need you to know, I never meant for any of this to happen. I never meant to hurt you. When we met, I loved you in a way I never thought possible. You were everything to me, my best friend, my rock. I never saw myself drifting away from you, never imagined I could even want anything else. But somewhere along the way, I started feeling like I'd lost a part of myself. Like I'd buried it in the day-to-day of being a wife, a partner. Maybe that sounds like a cop-out, and maybe it is. But I just wanted to feel something again. To feel like I was more than just a piece of a puzzle. I can't explain it any better than that." I sat down, gripping the letter as if it might somehow explain everything. But the words felt hollow, like she was saying what she thought she should, not what she really felt. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," the letter went on. "I know I don't deserve it. And I don't expect you to understand. But I wanted you to know that it wasn't about you. It was never about you. You were a good husband. A better man than I deserved. And maybe one day you'll be able to look back on us with some kind of peace, knowing that you did everything right. I hope you find happiness, James. I really do. I let the letter fall to the floor, a strange emptiness settling over me. It was like reading a stranger's words, like the woman I'd loved had been replaced by someone I didn't recognize. It wasn't about you. That's what she'd written. Maybe she thought those words would give me some comfort, would let me walk away feeling less like a failure. But they did the opposite. They left me feeling like I'd been standing in the shadows of her life, filling a role she no longer wanted to play. For the rest of the day, I couldn't shake that line from my mind. I went through the motions of cleaning up, trying to distract myself, but it lingered, gnawing at me. This wasn't just the end of a marriage, it was the end of an entire life I'd built, a life I'd thought would last forever. Over the next week, I avoided anyone who might ask questions. Friends, family, I didn't want to explain, didn't want to talk about what had happened. I buried myself in work, filling my time with projects and meetings, anything to keep my mind from wandering. But every time I came home, every time I walked through the front door, I felt the same ache, the same emptiness. One evening, about a week later, my brother stopped by unannounced. I hadn't told him anything, but somehow he knew. He sat down across from me in the kitchen, his gaze steady, no questions, no pity in his eyes. He was just there, and somehow that made it easier. "So, what now?" he asked finally, after we'd sat in silence for a while. I shrugged, trying to keep my voice steady. "I don't know. I guess I just start over." He nodded, not pushing for more. "Whatever you need, James. We're here for you." His words should have been a comfort, but they only reminded me of what I'd lost. The life I thought I'd have, the woman I thought I'd grow old with, it was all gone. But I knew he was right. This was my chance to start fresh, to rebuild. It wouldn't be easy, but maybe, just maybe, I'd find a way to move forward. As he left that night, I stood by the window, watching the lights of his car disappear down the street. For the first time since Sarah had left, I felt a flicker of hope. I didn't know what the future held, didn't know how I'd fill the emptiness she'd left behind. But one thing was clear, I was finally free. In the months that followed, I tried to rebuild my life, one fragile piece at a time. I settled into a routine, filling my days with work, filling my nights with anything that kept the silence at bay. I threw myself into projects, picked up hobbies I'd neglected, and even started running again. Friends and family said I looked better, stronger, like a man on the road to healing. I let them believe that, maybe I even believed it myself. But deep down, I knew something was missing, a shadow that lingered no matter how many miles I ran or how many late nights I spent at the office. One afternoon, months after Sarah had left, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. At first, I ignored it, but the same number kept calling, persistent. Finally, I answered. "James?" a woman's voice asked, tentative. "Yes, this is he." There was a long pause on the other end, as if the caller was trying to muster the courage to continue. "It's Julie," she finally said, her voice trembling. Julie was one of Sarah's closest friends, someone I hadn't seen or heard from since the divorce. I could hear her voice quivering, as though whatever she had to say was pressing down on her, something she'd held back for too long. "James, I don't know how to say this," she continued, her words choked. "But, it's Sarah." A strange, hollow chill crept over me. My grip on the phone tightened, my heart racing as I waited, barely breathing. "There was an accident," she said, her voice breaking. "Sarah was in a car crash last night. She didn't make it." The words sank into me, heavy and unreal. I stood there, frozen, feeling the world tilt around me as I tried to process what she'd said. Sarah was gone. Just like that. I managed to mutter a shaky, "Thank you," before hanging up, not fully aware of what I was saying or even what I was thinking. My hands were trembling, my mind reeling, torn between disbelief and shock. I'd spent months telling myself I was free, that I'd moved on, but in that moment, it all came rushing back. I walked aimlessly through the house, her face flashing in my mind, the woman I'd loved, the woman who'd betrayed me, who I'd wanted to forget but never could. She was gone, and there would never be a chance to say the things I hadn't said, to find the closure I thought I'd achieved. All those bitter, angry memories melted into something sharper, something I could no longer ignore. That night, unable to sleep, I went down to the basement, where I'd stored the last box of her things I hadn't been able to throw out. I'd meant to, eventually, but part of me had held on to it, as if keeping it meant I hadn't fully let her go. I sat on the cold floor, opening the box slowly, almost reverently, my hands brushing against the objects inside. At the bottom of the box was an old journal of hers, one I'd forgotten about. I opened it, flipping through pages of her familiar handwriting, feeling the weight of each word as if she were there with me, speaking through ink and paper. Her thoughts were scattered, disjointed, but one entry caught my eye. Dated just a few months before our marriage ended, the entry read, "Maybe James deserves more than I can give. He's so good, so steady. Sometimes I feel like I'm drowning in all this goodness, like I can't live up to it. I want to be that for him, but there's a part of me that just aches. He deserves better than this, better than someone who's always restless, always searching." A few pages later, she'd written, "I thought I could make this work. But I'm afraid. Afraid of losing him, afraid of keeping him. I know he sees through me sometimes, knows there's something broken inside me. Maybe that's why I can't stay. Because he deserves someone whole." The words blurred as I stared at them, my eyes stinging. All this time, I'd thought I understood, thought she'd simply chosen to leave, that she hadn't cared. But in those words, in her raw, broken honesty, I saw a part of her I'd never known, a vulnerability she'd hidden behind her smiles and reassurances. I'd thought I'd been the only one hurting, the only one shattered. But maybe Sarah had been as lost as I was, struggling to find her place in a life she couldn't fully commit to. I spent hours sitting there, reading through her thoughts, piecing together fragments of the woman I'd loved and lost. As dawn crept through the basement window, I realized that I'd never really known her, not truly, not in the way I'd believed. And now, I never would. She was gone, and I was left with nothing but shadows and words that would never be enough. In the weeks that followed, I went through the motions, returning to my routine, to my work, to the life I'd tried so hard to reclaim. But now, there was an emptiness that went deeper, a sadness that lingered in every quiet moment, in every place she'd once filled. I'd thought the end of our marriage was the end of the pain, the final chapter. But I'd been wrong. Her death had torn open a wound I'd thought was healed, reminding me that some losses were too deep to escape, that some endings would forever haunt the quiet spaces in my life. In time, people stopped asking about Sarah, stopped bringing her up. They assumed I was fine, that I'd moved on. But in the depths of those endless, solitary nights, I knew the truth. She was gone, and I was left holding the weight of the love I'd thought I'd lost, realizing too late that some goodbyes are permanent, that some loves never truly die. They linger in the heart, etched into the soul, an unhealed scar that would remain long after the world had forgotten her name.